What makes an app addictive? The secrets behind every great app. Addiction is when you're mentally and physically dependent on a particular substance and are unable to stop taking it without incurring adverse effects. Today we're going to be talking about an addiction that affects 176 million people. Mobile addiction. What is mobile addiction, you may ask? Well, a mobile addict is somebody who launches an app more than 60 times a day. Now, has anyone here ever been addicted to an app? Candy Crush, Flappy Bird, Crossy Road. Now, have you ever wondered why you were so addicted to this app? What kept you playing the game? What made you want to pass one more level and collect one more coin? Well, this is what's happening as you play the game. First of all, there's an initial reaction even before you download the app. Automatically, our brains will form a judgment on the game just based off of how it looks. For example, if you were to see the game Candy Crush, your brain will automatically associate happy feelings with the game because of the candy aspect. Another thing we notice almost immediately is if the app is free. The free factor makes the app more appealing. Now we're going to move into what happens initially after the app is downloaded. An attractive feature that almost every addictive app has is simple instructions. Now remember, simplicity is key to app designers. Most apps have one instruction, which is tap. This cuts out any confusion for the player. The easier, the better. Now after you download the app and read the instructions, it's time to play the game. This is where app designers really get you hooked. First of all, they'll start you off with really easy levels. This does two things. First of all, it builds confidence. And second, it gets your dopamine flowing. Every time you pass the level, a burst of dopamine will release in your brain. Now you may be wondering, what is dopamine? Well, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy. This is what makes you feel happy when you beat out other players. As you keep playing those easy levels, your body will become used to the happiness that it's feeling. This is when the addiction starts. Because as you keep playing, the levels will get more difficult and your body will begin to crave those bursts of dopamine. As this continues, something called desensitization will take place. Desensitization is this. When you keep playing the game because of your body craving those bursts of dopamine, your brain will begin to close off some of its dopamine receptors. Those are what receive the happy feelings and connect them to the rest of your body. Your brain does this because it senses the strange change in the levels of your dopamine, and it's like a warning to tell you to stop doing what you're doing. Instead, since you still crave those bursts of dopamine, you'll play the game even more to make up for the closed-off receptors. All the while, more are closing off. Now, you might be able to somewhat feel the same happiness, but app designers have factored in a time limit. Essentially, they're cutting you off in the hedonic treadmill. This means that the game will cut you off when you're most invested or when your dopamine levels are the highest. Another way app designers get you addicted is through in-app purchases. In-app purchases trigger a few things. First of all, by human nature, we want control. We want complete control over our situations, and games are no different. In-app purchases allow the user to buy upgrades that help them control their gaming situation. They're often offered when your dopamine levels are the highest. For example, right when you run out of lives. Going back to the levels getting more difficult as you go on, this puts into play something called the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, or the slot machine tactic. Pretty much this means that you don't know when you're going to win, but you win often enough to keep playing. Now, how do app designers factor all of these things into one app? Well, that's what I asked myself too. So I decided to take all of the information that I learned and use it. I created my own game. Now, having no background in app designing or programming, I was completely lost. So I asked an expert, Amanda Wixted. She's the top programmer in the app world. Her work includes Pac-Man and Farmville. She now spends her time going to different workshops and conventions that teach kids how to code. She was the perfect person to ask my questions. So I asked, what advice would you give to a first-time app programmer? She said, practice makes perfect. You're never going to get it on your first try. Next, I asked, what are the steps to creating a game? She said, come up with an idea, flush it out, and code it. After hearing this, I asked, how long does it usually take to create a game? She said, anywhere from 3 to 24 months. I had 2 weeks. So to recap, I had no plan, a non-existent skill set in the coding world, and I had 2 weeks to figure it all out. Great. To begin this process, I thought about what I could realistically accomplish in my time frame, and I found a game generator which provides you with the tools to create your own game. My first attempt at this was not very good. It took me 3 days just to create the background, and it was also very frustrating when my little character, who by the way was an astronaut, didn't move, but everything else, including the coins and clouds, did. Obviously, this wasn't working, so I discovered this app called Hopscotch, which provides kids with the tools to create their own games. It has an easy setup and simple tutorials, exactly what I needed. So I went back to the whiteboard and I created screens of a game that was pretty much Flappy Bird, but modified. So this is my game. And what I first did was I added 2 levels. This refers back to the dopamine levels and manipulating them. And then next, if you notice, there's different characters, and that's because this keeps the player interested, but without changing too many things. And this is the code behind it. And if you see all those thin-lettered words, those are commandments, and each of them have coding behind that. The most difficult part of this process was probably adding in that second level, because all of a sudden things had to disappear, reappear, and then disappear again. So finally, after all that work was done, it was time to test out my game. So I assembled a focus group of about 20 people, age range 6 to adult, and what I did was I didn't tell them I created the game because I didn't want any pity points. And then I had them play the game and then complete a short questionnaire regarding it, and this is what I found. So was this game hard to play? And this means, was the instruction tap and don't hit the pipes difficult to understand? The majority of people said no, that wasn't too hard to grasp. Next, I asked, how often would you play this game? 10 people said very often, and only 2 people said not at all. So, did you get frustrated when you didn't complete a level? This is where things get interesting. 75% of people said yes, they did get frustrated. So, how do you prevent mobile addiction, or if you're already addicted, how do you cure it? There are a number of ways to do this. First of all, don't play games right before you sleep. This is prime time for addicted people to play their games because you have no other responsibilities at that time, and you have an unlimited amount of time to play. Another thing you can do is download an app. Now, this may seem a little counterproductive, but there are apps out there like Break Free that will put into perspective just how much time you're spending on a particular app in your phone in general. Another thing you can do is limit the amount of notifications your phone sends you. A notification is like your phone saying, you have 5 new lives, or I'm still here. It's a constant reminder of what you could be doing. Now, why should we care about mobile addiction? Games are fun, right? Well, they are until we become dependent on them. This can ruin memories like vacations or even just hanging out with friends. Do we really want to live in a world where the most important thing in our life is if we can level up in a virtual game? Thank you.